Listen closely. For the next 15 seconds, hold your breath and think of the last lullaby you ever heard. Now imagine hearing it on a battlefield, drifting from the enemy's camp, sung in your own language by a voice you've never met. You pause. Your finger leaves the trigger, and you live. That is how a human stops a war. That is why we tried to ban them from ours. I am Kaith of the Veer Conquered, an archivist assigned to record the compliance campaigns along the Perseus Spur. My crest is chipped at the edges, my ink stem stained by years of reports. I have seen the art of war in too many colors, the clean white of surrender cloth, the cold blue of starship hulls, the furious red of vented life. The official words say our wars are limited, hygienic, and civilized. Lines are drawn in space with legal beams. Fleets meet, exchange ritual cautions, and withdraw when the ledger of acceptable losses tips. We prune, we never burn. We keep score like patient merchants. We call this peace. The humans were not meant to be here. They were listed in the Accord of 18 as cultural contaminants, which is the polite way to say trouble. Their record in the archive shows too much improvisation, too much stubbornness, too much belief. When they arrive in a war, the formulas wobble. The families who profit from ships and shells complain. So the Senate banned humans from direct service. They could live in our worlds, trade in our markets, study in our halls, yes. But their boots would not stand in our firing lines. On Corinth Station, where the spur bends around the dim yellow of Vela 9, the ban was a joke everybody told while pretending it wasn't funny. There were 3,000 labor contracts filed under auxiliary logistics, which is another polite phrase. Humans hauled crates and brewed coffee and checked seals on cargo airlocks. The officers of the Concorde liked them because they were fast, and the clerks liked them because they were kind. But they were not supposed to decide anything. Our commander was Prefect Voss Terrell, a long-limbed Siltari with polished tusks and a taste for ceremony. He loved speeches about hygiene and law. He kept a bronze copy of the Accord of 18 above his desk and recited its preamble before every fleet movement. He believed in controlled conflict the way some priests believe in dawn. When the Kyr Dominion struck across the spur, it was supposed to be the usual, a push, a counter-move, a slow trade of positions until the Senate negotiated a tariff and everyone signed a new map. Voss ordered the orbital mines staggered along the legal boundary. He notified the Kyr Marshal of our readiness with a respectful burst across the treaty frequency. He composed a courteous address to the station, all about composure and vigilance. But the Kyr did not answer with ceremony. They came with noise. Their ships threw jamming fields like nets. They cut our outer radars into silence. When our second ring went to full alert, the Kyr dropped a rock on it. A guided asteroid splashed with copper paint to confuse our thermals, and it punched through like a hammer. 400 were gone in the time it took to update a status board. Voss stood frozen, his speech still open on his console. We had never seen the Kyr break the dance. We said they were arrogant brutes, yes, but always within the rules. Not that day. The Kyr had a new marshal, people said, a zealot with ash on his scales. He did not care for ledgers. The first human I saw that day was a woman in a grease-stained jacket, her hair tied back with wire, her hands moving faster than my eyes could track. She did not salute. She did not ask permission. She walked into the operations bay, slid her toolbox under a console with one boot, and began to repatch the shattered sensor grid as if it were a torn sail. "Name," I said, because protocol needs a peg to hang on. "Hale," she said without looking up. "Mara Hale, logistics. I need your low-band receiver." "That frequency is reserved for families," she said. "I know. That's why it will be clear. Humans ask forgiveness more than permission. They speak like cliffs, short, sharp lines that stop waves." I should have stopped her. Voss should have thrown her out. Instead, for reasons I still do not understand and do not need to, I pushed my chair back and gave Mara the receiver. She tuned with her thumb and forefinger, a tiny circular motion, like she was turning thought itself. She didn't touch the broadcast channel we used for orders. She tuned the open bands, the bands where shopkeepers argue and children sing and lovers whisper. She lifted the mic. "This is Corinth Station," she said. "This is Mara Hale. If you can hear me, listen. Don't crowd the corridors. Get water boiling. If you've got a pan, turn it upside down and beat a beat. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. If you've got a voice, hum this tone." She leaned close to the console and sang a note. It was low. It was steady. It vibrated in my crest. It felt like the station's spine humming. "I'm going to count from 10, she said. "We're going to breathe together. Ready? 10, 9, 8. No one had asked her to calm a station. No one had authorized the way the corridors filled with that even note, with the rhythm of pans, with breathing in time. But the panic that had been rising like steam in the vented hallways slowed and gathered. The terror that was ready to stampede paused long enough for the medics to move, for the doors to seal, for the crews to think. The Kier kept coming. They punched at us with knife-shaped ships and raked our outer ring with scraping fire. Voss found his voice and began to issue orders again. He told the gun decks to cluster and fire in brackets. He told the mines to stagger and skip. He told the pilots to drag the Kier into our tethered gravity wells. His voice got stronger. The plan looked like a plan again. Mara didn't leave the operations bay. She was not on any roster. She did not need to be. When the first refugees came in, miners from the ice habitats, a freighter crew that had jumped at the wrong time, the corridors filled again, not with panic now, but with bodies, all moving, all needing. Mara sent humans to the docks with paper signs and string. "Hang your names," she said. "Families find families faster when names move." Voss watched in tight-lipped disapproval but said nothing. The ban was a wall he could not see through. He had learned to look away from it. That night, when the false dusk of damage control lights spread in the station, I found Mara in the side corridor outside Dock 7, tightening a valve with the flat of her hand. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Stealing time," she said. "We're going to need it." "And you?" I asked. "What do you need?" She looked at me with those human irises that change with every light, like the skins of their oceans. "I need a promise," she said. "When this gets ugly, and it will, you won't say this is not our way and walk out. You'll stay. You'll watch." "I am an archivist," I said. "I always watch." She shook her head. "Watching is not the hard part. Remembering is—" I did not understand then. I would. The second day, the Kier cut our power to the outer ring. The third day, they dropped 3 boarding spines and tried to climb us like a tree. The fourth day, they broadcast their marshal's voice to our corridors, a voice smeared like cold oil across the open bands. He told us to be hygienic and surrender. He said we were out of compliance. He used our own words like knives. On the 4th night, in the little hours when crews sleep if they can, I stood in the maintenance well above Dock 9 and listened to a song. It came from the old low-band receiver. Mara had tied it into the ventilation. She had tied a lot of things into places they weren't meant to be since she arrived. The song was simple, 4 chords that even a child could follow. It was sung in a dozen voices, then in 100, the people of the station finding enough air to sing. The lyrics were a list of names. Not our names. Theirs. Mara had begun to read the Kier death rolls. You need to understand what that means. In our wars, we count ships, not bodies. We talk about tonnage lost, not sons. We do that because our wars are commerce dressed in uniform. We do it to live with ourselves. The Kier did it too, when they wanted to call themselves civilized. Mara did not believe in civilized blood. She believed that grief speaks any language. She read the Kier names slowly, carefully, like she was holding them with both hands. She mispronounced some, and then she corrected herself and read them again. She told where each name had been recorded, which boarding spine, which corridor. She added with calm precision the way the light had looked in the air at that moment. People listened. Kier ears, too, if any were close enough to catch a leak in our jamming fields, would hear her, I thought. The marshal might hear his own kin. He might hear his ledger turn to faces. I am telling you how it began because beginnings matter. No one ordered the humans to do this. No one sanctioned their way. They made tea in bomb shelters and laughter in bad lighting and bridges out of cargo nets. They made a tone that kept hands steady. They made a list of names and sang them into the air. This is not how the conquered wages war. It is how the humans carried us through the first week. Or 2, on the 7th day, the station smelled like burned dust and coffee. The air scrubbers were working, but they were tired. The Kier had learned our turning speeds and hit us in the gaps. We had learned their arrogance and baited it. The ledger of damage tilted and tilted back. Voss updated his ceremonial bronze with a small new scratch. We were holding but just. The Kier were building something out there, beyond the nearest tethered well. Their signals unrolled like banners in the static. Our analysts said superstructure. Our engineers said trouble. Our sieve. On the seventh day, the station smelled like burned dust and coffee, like a workshop that had stayed open through a storm. The air scrubbers pushed and pushed. Their fans made a low, steady moan, like animals carrying a load. The Kier did not pause. They learned our turning speed and struck when we were between stances. They moved like a knife that knows the curve of a bone. We held anyway. The lights flickered. The decks creaked. The ledger leaned toward ruin and then, against the numbers, leaned back. Humans resist in ways uniforms don't count. They make a normal day and let you stand on it. That is how they fought. Mara took a grease pencil and drew a new map on the wall of the operations bay. Not ships, not guns. Kitchens, cot clusters, latrine lines, story hubs where we hung the low-band receivers, quiet rooms where some kind of healer would just listen and let people empty their fear into a chair. She marked stairwells that must always flow down, and cargo shafts that must always flow up, and cross corridors that must never be blocked. She marked a bell icon wherever a kettle should always be hot. She labeled the bells tea, then added broth, then underlined both twice. Voss came through the bay with his long, polished stride and stopped to look. His tusks were bright. His cuff seams were sharper than the edge of a discipline order. He leaned forward, took in the hand-drawn lines, and made a face as if he had bit a seed in his soup. Then he walked the station and saw the chairs where there had been floor, the water where there had been air, the small circles of ease where there had been nothing. He stopped making faces. When the first boarding spines drilled into Deck 12, it felt like a cough in the metal. The emergency lights went dirty orange. The air thinned. The alarm bleated like a sad horn. Voss did the ritual thing. 2 squads of Marines to the cut. It would have been a slaughter either way. That is what boarding is. A narrow pipe where bodies collide, where each strike is face to face, and the only clean thing is fear. Mara rolled a drum into the corridor. She had slapped a sticker on its side, a line of tiny icons that looked like ants marching. I blinked at the label and saw the word detergent. She popped the valve with the flat of her hand. The floor slicked. Our Marines changed their stance. They planted light poles and pivoted on their hips. They jabbed with padded ends like gym teachers instead of killers. They laughed. The first Kier line tripped, knocked the second, tumbled into the third. Shock tethers flew. Arms were taken. Knives were turned harmless. We sealed the cut. We pumped the air. The ledger did not fill with dead in that tube. "You are mocking them," Voss said to her afterward, trapped between outrage and relief. "We're confusing them," she said. "They expect clean, cold angles. We are kind and unreasonable. That is harder to counter than rage." She was right for a time. The Kier sent skates on their boots on the next try. They sent their own slick and their own foam and a new timing for their cutting charges. Every trick plants its twin across the line if you fight long enough. But by then, our people had learned to grip a handhold when the alarm sang, to hum the tone while the body shook, to count from 10 together like a single heart before a squeeze. The station changed shape around those habits. It learned to breathe. On the 9th day, the black shape beyond the tether wells finished unfolding. It looked like a lantern with blades, a flower turned inside out. Our analysts went gray. A gravity thorn. Illegal in our law. Efficient in theirs. A device to pluck a station from its bracket and wring it like wet cloth. Voss stood in front of its shape on the main display and read the clause from the Accord of 18 that condemned such things. He held the words like a shield. The thorn hummed. "This is wrong," Voss said, his voice too soft for the room. "Then don't be," Mara said. He turned, startled by the plainness. "What would you do?" he asked. "Feed the—" He actually laughed, a short bark from a polished throat. Then he stopped, because the idea would not leave. It came back the way a smell comes back when you are hungry. Mara tied our oldest low-band receiver into the ventilation trunks so every open space on the station could hear. She spoke with the voice she used to calm a dock full of bodies. "To anyone serving on the lantern with blades," she said, not using the word thorn, not giving it a name with a curse in it. We have stew in Dock 3, thick, spiced, bread beside. If you come unarmed in fives and walk the yellow lines, we feed you and you go home with sealed bowls for your comrades. If you come armed, we will stun you and keep the bowl. Walk the yellow lines. She painted those lines herself with a brush stuck through the handle of a bucket, slow and careful, so the paint would not bubble. There were scanners beside the lines for metal. There were chairs every 10 meters with med techs and blankets. There were guards with shock batons held at an angle that means, I hope to never use this. At first our own came, drawn by the word stew. They were turned away with a smile and a promise. The rule was the rule, and the rule made shape. The shape was more important than full stomachs. Rules can be doors if you decide to hang them that way. In the 8th hour, 5 Kier walked the yellow lines. Young, armor heavy with family pride. Eyes like coins. They sat stiffly. They ate. They said nothing. Sealed bowls were handed to them. They stood. They walked away and did not look back. The thorn did not fire that night. You can say they feared a trap. You can say their marshal wanted to study us more. You can say a dozen technical reasons. But the simplest answer floats to the top like fat. They had eaten our food. They had looked straight down a painted path and not been cheated. The thorn waited because some small thing in the crew's chest did not want to twist a place that had fed them. We did not praise this out loud. We did not trust it. We kept breathing. We kept moving. We kept counting spoons. The next day, the thorn did fire. The station groaned. Bolts sang. The deck jerked like a sick animal trying to stand. We held. Voss ordered mines to fan toward the lantern. He ordered the gun decks to weave a cage of fire. He read the accord and then, without meaning to, began to quote Mara. Hum the tone, breathe on 10, walk the yellow lines, keep the kettles lit. The thorn fired again, and the sound it made in the bones of the station was like a mountain cracking. We sealed 2 bleeds with cargo tarps and clamps that were never meant for blood. We waited for the third pull, the one that would ring us. It did not come. The blades slowed. The hum dropped. The analysts shouted in new voices. The cooks kept stirring stew even while they stared up at the ceiling because the spoon must be kept moving even when the sky is changing. They turned it off, Mara said. Why? Voss asked. Equal parts relief and confusion and something breaking loose inside him. Because they heard their brothers' names last night, she said. Because they ate our soup. Because they are not machines. She went back to the pantry of the operations bay then and pulled out a bag of signal markers and a bundle of cloth. She carried them like a priest carries a lamp. The cloth bands were white. She printed a single word on each in thick black letters, guest. The marshal had switched bands earlier that day. He found our emergency frequency, the one we keep clean for fires and broken hulls, and he spoke to us there in a voice that tried to sound like law. He told us the humans on Corinth were contaminants. Remove them, he said, or be cleansed. Mara wrote guest, and the word settled on those narrow bands with a weight the Senate never foresaw. We passed them down the corridors. Every human tied one on, sleeves, belts, hair, necks. Some smiled, some cried. All stood a little taller. Guests are protected under the accord, Mara said to Voss when he bristled. It does not specify ink type. The next boarding party moved through Dock 7 with the wrong rhythm. Our scanners sang for metal. The Kier who had walked for soup the night before tied white bands around their ridges, clumsy, and came in unarmed again. Our guards let the first 5 pass and the 6th as well. We fed them. We fed their fear. We fed our own. Between pushes and pulls, we fought with other tools. Humans turned maintenance drones into shepherds. They painted the drones bright with leftover hull paint so children would laugh when they saw them, and it is hard to be afraid of a bright thing with winking lights. They tethered 3 drones at a time and taught them to carry med packs down the yellow lines. They taught them to stop at the sound of the lullaby tone. In the central garden bay where the algae panels live, the humans planted 6 boxes of wheat they found in an agricultural kit no one had opened for years. They said it was silly. The yield would not matter for months, but it mattered to grow something, to have green that was not a filter gel. It mattered to pinch off a leaf and taste bitterness, and know that the world was still making parts of itself on purpose. At night, When the lights went to their damaged low and the station dreamed in the hiss of patched lines, the humans started radio theater. It was simple, a voice with a kettle beside it. A story told in episodes. Two old friends in a town by a river. They talked about ordinary things. One night they argued gently about the right way to coil a rope. Another night they tried to name all the constellations their grandparents had taught them wrong. A day later, the actors asked a guest onto the show, an engineer from a mining rig, who taught everyone listening how to listen to a machine without touching it. Close your eyes, count the gaps, learn the rhythm, feel for the scrape that means a bearing is dry. The day after the Marshal and Voss spoke on pale paint, something tore across the spur that had nothing to do with metal. It was pride ripping under strain. You could feel it in the way orders came late from certain Kier ships, in the way the station's rumor whine shifted from "Is this over?" to "Who is about to be punished for it?" Peace is a cliff. The first ones to step toward it look like fools until the ground appears under their feet. It was the hardliners on both sides who moved first. From the Senate came a compliance cruiser painted the color of law. The sigils on its flanks were bright as fresh knives. It anchored well beyond the tether line and spoke in a voice like polished stone. Prefect Voss Terrell, stand by to be relieved. All human auxiliaries are to be removed from vital areas effective immediately. This station will return to hygienic posture. From the Kier came a different answer. Not dressed, not polished. 3 destroyers switched their beacons to black and cut at the Marshal's communications net. Their captain spoke on a private band that was only private because shame kept it quiet. "We will not kneel to soup," said one. "We will fire the lantern ourselves," said another. The third said nothing. He saved his breath. The Marshal did the only hard true thing. He broadcast the quiet band on the open family frequency. We all heard the insult, the plan, the breath the third had kept. He lit his own shame and held it up so the right people could see by it. Voss stood at the treaty console and did not blink when the compliance cruiser read out the clauses like a prayer to a god who asks for nothing but paperwork. "I hear and acknowledge," he said, "which is what you say when the words are correct and the moment is not." Mara poured tea for nobody in particular. Her hands did not shake. "They are going to try to end the peace before it begins," she said. "On both sides. So we will begin it before they can end it." "How?" I asked, because I had not yet learned that with humans, the answer to that word is always 1,000 small things done at once. "By pulling," she said. The plan was not a plan in the way we write them. It was a list of threads to be tugged until a knot came free. Mara sent John and Sarah back across the void on the dumb winch lines, not to the lantern this time, but to the smallest of the 3 black beacon destroyers, the one whose captain had kept his breath. They carried no tools now, only bread and a small bundle wrapped in gray cloth. She sent Ash and Pip to the garden bay with orders to harvest the wheat that wasn't ready and weave it into nets. She sent Tal to logistics to empty the towel lockers and requisition every blanket, tarp, and curtain the station owned. "What for?" Voss asked, watching blankets pile like snowfall. "To make the guns deaf," Mara said. "It is a failure of imagination in most civilized fleets that their targeting systems are smarter than their doctrine." The Kier thermal sights looked for edges and heat contrasts. They loved the neat geometry of armor, the clean line of a limb, the signature of a weapon ready to bloom. They did not know what to do with slow, soft, tumbling things. We opened the outer cargo doors above Dock 6 and let a river of blankets drift out into the line of fire. Towels, tarps, the garden bay's shade cloth, soft continents of ordinary life. They inflated and curled and caught on each other, a cloud with weight. The Kier gunners shouted and tried to burn them away. Their sights swallowed wool and weave, and the edges went away. Our drone shepherds, painted bright like children's toys, herded the cloud where Mara pointed. "It looks ridiculous," Voss said, not as an insult but as a benediction. "I hope so," Mara said. "Ridiculous is the shortest path between habit and thought." The compliance cruiser watched our cloth weather with what I swear was affronted silence. Its captain sent a crisp note. "Station is to cease unregulated deployments." Voss replied with a sentence so polite it sounded like agreement until you read it twice. In the meantime, John and Sarah reached the destroyer whose captain had saved his breath. They knocked, literally with their gloved fists, on a maintenance lock until a startled crewman opened to shout at the vacuum and met a loaf of bread instead. He dragged them into a corridor that smelled like old metal and fear. "We came to pull," John said, showing the bundle. "Pull what?" the Kier asked, curious despite himself. "Us," Sarah said simply. "And you, if you choose. Away from fools." Inside the gray cloth was a remembrance patch. Not a node, not the bell, only a small coil with a 10-meter whisper, a handspan of truth no larger than a room. "We won't use it if you don't want it," Sarah said. "We just want to talk where lies feel wrong." They talked in a supply closet, that honest room of any ship, with shelves of bolts and bulbs leaning like sleepy soldiers. The captain came, brittle with rank and doubt. He listened to John describe the way the lantern's capacitors would cascade if fired while the destroyer's nets were misaligned, the way the marshal's kin would die along with their enemies. John's hands shook when he got to that part. Sarah put the little coil on the shelf and did not press the stud. The captain reached out and touched it with one claw as a man might touch a door he is not sure he wants to open, not because he needs proof, but because he needs to feel how cold the metal is. "My crew will not mutiny," he said. "We aren't asking them to," Sarah said. "We're asking them to interpret standing orders in the direction of mercy." "What orders?" "Don't blow up your cousins for the pride of 3 men." He closed his eyes. Pride ripped again. You could hear it in steel. Back at Corinth, the blanket weather pushed the destroyers into a stutter they had not trained for. They blew heat at soft things, and the soft things drank it and changed shape and came on. Under that moving sky, our drone shepherds carried cords across open space and anchored them to the lantern's blade housings like spiders taking possession of a porch. Every cord was bright yellow, the same paint as the lines in Dock 3. If you are going to build a corridor in the mind, paint it the same everywhere. "What are you doing to my skies?" the compliance captain asked over the tight beam, her vowels sharp with a schoolroom's patience. "Making shade," Mara said pleasantly. "Our engineers overheat when they're nervous." "Remove the humans," the captain said to Voss, "because when softness is stronger than your ship, it is useful to invent a rule." Voss, who had learned the new courage and was still learning the old, answered like a man skirting a cliff. "The guests are protected under the accord. Guests may not interfere with sanctioned operations. Feeding people is not interference. Blankets are not food," the captain said, who had never watched a rifle go blind from cloth and kindness. While the law argued with itself, Ash and Pip finished weaving the wheat into nets. It was absurd. It was magnificent. They laced in strips of foil from outdated ration warmers and packets of spice from the kitchen so the nets glittered and smelled like soup. They stretched them across the mouth of Dock 2 and lit them from behind so they glowed like a low sun. The destroyer's optical sights recoiled like eyes walking out of a dark room into noon. Every time they compensated, a drone shepherd drifted a blanket through the new focus, and the sight sighed and lost its edge again. The first shock came then, the one that belonged to the Kier. One of the black beacon destroyers fired at the lantern. Not in rage, in calculation. Fire the lantern on half alignment, they thought, and blame the enemy for the misfire. Let the grief wash away the marshal's shame. It was a monstrously tidy thought. It would have worked in any ordinary war. The cord brightened. The blade housing strained. The lantern shuddered. The station creaked like a ship hit by a wave. People grabbed for handholds and hummed the tone. Somewhere a child laughed once, the bright sound of a mistake turning out not to be one. The cords held. The blade never locked. The bad math unraveled down the line and died as heat in our blanket weather. Heat is honest. It goes where it is wanted. And then came the shock that belonged to us. The one that made the Kier stop thinking about us as clever vermin and start thinking of us as something nobody had a word for. A shuttle pushed off from Dock 3 with its lights off and a rope around its waist. Not a cable. Not a grapple. A rope. The thick braided line the station used to lash cargo in rough jumps. 50 human volunteers had tied it to their belts and to the shuttle's spine. They leaned in unison, slow and patient, and they pulled. "What are they doing?" Voss asked, wonder already in his mouth. "Teaching," Mara said. The Lantern's crew needs to see a way to live with themselves tomorrow. You don't learn that from a speech. You learn it from watching fools do something impossible in kind. The rope hummed. The men and women on it counted breaths, 10 down, 10 up, and leaned when the count said lean. On the low band, the station's Rivertown radio play stopped mid-episode. The kettle hissed. Then the voice of the old friend in the story said, "All hands," and began to call the count, steady as a metronome. It should not have mattered. The shuttle was a seed against a storm. The volunteers were a line of ants on a table, but the Lantern's crew could see them through maintenance ports, through the smoke of cheap heat, through the soup smell drifting on the blanket weather. They could see that while hardliners tried to write a story with blood, 50 strangers were writing another with a rope. On the destroyer, where John and Sarah had asked for interpretation, the captain raised his hand. "Align with the marshal," he said to his helm. "Not with the black beacons." The day after the rope went slack and the Lantern drifted harmless, the spur went quiet. Too quiet. It was the silence that comes when everyone is waiting for the punishment they think they've earned. The air recyclers hummed like insects in a jar. The low band played nothing at all. Even the soup kettles simmered softer as if the water itself was listening. The Senate's reply arrived first. A cold communique, encrypted, wrapped in etiquette. It was 23 pages of legal phrasing that boiled down to 2 words. Explain yourself. Voss read it once, then again slower. He looked 10 years older by the time he folded the tablet closed. "They think we broke the accord," he said. "They think we let contamination command us." Mara leaned against the wall, arms folded, smudges of sleep around her eyes. "Did we?" He looked at her for a long time. "I don't know," he said finally. "But we saved the spur." "That's what scares them," she said. Outside the station's windows, the Kier ships held their positions like uncertain animals. Some had turned off their weapons. Some hadn't. The Marshal's flagship floated at a respectful distance, its running lights dimmed, its comms open. The soldiers on both sides had begun to breathe differently, lighter, almost hopeful, but none dared call it peace. Then the blast came. A shock wave hit us before the sound did. It was a pulse, like a god's heartbeat against the hull. The alarm screamed. Pressure doors slammed. I was thrown against the bulkhead hard enough to taste blood. Through the viewport, I saw a bloom of fire where the Kier destroyer Ravachon had been. Gone in a blink. The Marshal's voice cut through the static. "Not me. Not mine." Someone else had fired. "Compliance cruiser," said a tech at comms, pale as smoke. "They opened fire on the Kier fleet." Voss froze. "Why?" The answer came seconds later, on a clear Senate frequency. "This is the Concord Compliance Authority. Corinth Station is under arrest for violations of interspecies warfare protocols. Surrender or be purged of human interference." Every word was a hammer. Mara exhaled slowly. "Well," she said, "that didn't take long." Voss turned on her. "Do you understand what you've done?" "Yes," she said, calm. "I made you choose between law and life. And you made them afraid. That too." The Marshal hailed again. "Prefect Voss, we stand ready to defend Corinth." Voss hesitated. The bronze accord gleamed behind him, its polished letters reflecting the red of the alarms. He looked from it to the faces in the operations bay, alien, human, tired, alive. Then he reached out, lifted the plaque from its hooks, and set it gently on the floor. "Marshal Carr," he said into the mic, "you will defend nothing. We will defend each other." The battle that followed wasn't like the others. It wasn't a war between empires. It was a brawl between ideals. The compliance cruiser had clean angles, proper protocols, and 1,000 reasons to believe it was righteous. We had soup and rope and yellow paint. When its first salvo came, it was surgical. It sliced through our outer hull, disabling our hangars with minimal casualties. That was how they liked it. Efficient death, neat on paper. Voss barked orders, but Mara didn't wait. She ran to Dock 3, tore open the radio console, and keyed the low band. Every ship listening, Kier, Concord, whoever still remembers your own breath, this is Corinth Station. They're coming to erase a story you heard yourselves write. If you've got a hand free, hold the rope. The phrase became a signal. Across the spur, freighters, tugs, even scavenger rigs turned their noses toward us. They had no guns, no shields worth naming. But they came, lights blinking like candles in the dark. The compliance cruiser warned them off. Unregistered vessels disperse or be treated as combatants. They didn't. They began to link. Mara had shown them how with her yellow cords. Tug to tug, ship to ship, they tied themselves into a chain. Hundreds of small crafts forming a people's barrier between the cruiser and Corinth. Insanity, whispered Voss. Absolute insanity. Yeah, said Mara. Our specialty. The cruiser's commander must have thought it was bluff. He ordered a low-power warning burst. It swept through the chain like a storm. Half the ship spun. One caught fire. Still the line held. Then the marshal moved. He sent his own flagship forward and locked position beside the human freighters. The Kier destroyers followed. A new wall formed, Concord and Kier ships together side by side, guns silent, hulls angled outward like shields. The compliance cruiser stopped firing. For 10 seconds, the Galaxy forgot how to breathe. Then the cruiser did something worse than fire. It broadcast. "Citizens of the Concord," said a woman's voice, clipped and perfect. "This is Director Isolde of the Compliance Authority. You are witnessing the contamination of lawful warfare by human emotion. They are not heroes. They are chaos wearing kindness as camouflage. Withdraw now and your records will be cleansed. Stay, and you will be branded collaborators." Her words were venom wrapped in silk, and they worked on some. A few tugs broke away. One Concord escort peeled off, turning its nose toward the safety of legality. Fear smells like logic when it's written in the right tone. But most stayed. Mara leaned into the mic. "Director, this is Mara Hale. You've got my name already, I'm sure. It's the one stamped on your blacklist." "You say humans are chaos?" "You're right, we are. We break patterns. We spill over the edges of your pretty rules. But look around. Your enemies and your allies are standing together for the first time in centuries. You call that contamination? I call it cure." Silence again. Then, softly, the marshal began to sing. It was a Kier mourning hymn, low and ragged, made for scales and cracked teeth. One voice, then two, then 100. Our side picked up the tone and carried it in harmony. The low band filled with it. The hum Mara had taught us now folded into the Kier song until no one could tell who had started it. The cruiser hesitated. You could almost hear the director's doubt through the static. The doctrine she'd built her life on was unraveling to the sound of a lullaby. "Prefect Voss," she said finally, "you have 10 minutes to surrender." He looked at Mara. "How long will the node field reach?" She understood immediately. "Far enough." "Do it," he said. "Voss, if we do this again, there's no undoing it." "I know." She opened the case. The remembrance node hummed, soft as breath. "Everyone who dies within its field," she whispered. "Their last 10 minutes become part of the song." "You're sure?" Voss straightened. "If law demands silence, then let truth make noise." She pressed the stud. The node's field bloomed like dawn. It spread through metal, through signal, through blood. Every ship within range, ours, theirs, the marshals heard it. Voices, not screaming, just speaking. A Kier gunner whispering to his wife. A Concord pilot humming the lullaby. A child aboard a freighter asking if soup was ready yet. An engineer cursing the cold, then laughing at his own breath. The node made them impossible to ignore. In the cruiser's bridge, officers froze. In the marshal's ship, soldiers wept openly. In our station, Mara leaned against the console, tears cutting clean paths through the soot on her cheeks. Then something extraordinary happened. A new voice joined the node's braid, a human woman, older, calm. "This is Director Isolde," she said. "Cease fire! Cease everything!" The cruiser went dark. Engines idle, guns cold. The node quieted itself as if content. No one cheered. No one dared. We were too small beneath what we'd just witnessed. When the light returned, Voss sat down slowly, his hands trembling. "She heard them," he said. "She finally heard them." Mara smiled faintly. "That's all it ever takes. Someone willing to listen." The next morning, if morning still meant anything out there, the Senate sent a final message. It was shorter this time. "Corinth Station is to be sealed. The human experiment is concluded. Prefect Voss is relieved of command. All humans to be relocated. The remembrance technology is to be surrendered and destroyed. They thought they could close the story like a file, but they couldn't erase what had already spread. The Kier broadcast their own message to every corner of the spur. They told the truth about the soup, the rope, the node, the lullaby. They called it the Corinth Accord, written not on paper, but in the memory of every witness. For once, the galaxy remembered without permission. Voss stood before his crew one last time. The Senate will say we disobeyed. The historians will say we disobeyed beautifully. Either way, obey your conscience first. He turned to Mara. They'll come for you. They always do, she said. But the story's already out there. He held out the bronze plaque of the old Accord. You want this? She shook her head. Keep it. Melt it down if you ever need a pot. She picked up the node case, now silent, and slung it over her shoulder. I'll carry the next one. Voss gave her a soldier's bow, the kind that means respect, not rank. Good luck, Mara Hale. You too, Prefect. She walked to the airlock with that same easy, defiant grace she'd had on the first day, the day she'd sung into a broken receiver and made a frightened station breathe. When the hatch closed behind her, I realized what she'd really done. Not just saved us, not just ended a battle. She'd shown the galaxy its reflection and dared it to like what it saw. The Kier called her the Quiet Belle. We called her human, and both meant the same thing. The galaxy does not heal quickly. It scars, and then it learns to live with the shape of those scars. Corinth became one such scar. A silent station orbiting the dim star Vela 9, half museum, half grave. Official records call it Quarantined Installation 37C. Everyone else calls it what it really is, the station that sang. Years passed. The Senate never admitted wrongdoing. They don't do that. Instead, they issued a long report called On the Limits of Sentient Empathy in Conflict. They spoke of anomalous contagion of morale and psychological destabilization. They outlawed the remembrance node again, this time not just for humans, but for everyone. They outlawed rope deployments, blanket fields, and unsanctioned civilian communications during military operations. They called it safety. We called it fear dressed as paperwork. I stayed. Archivists are hard to remove. We become part of the dust between the files. I was ordered to preserve the events of Corinth in restricted form. I obeyed outwardly, but I wrote another version. This one, the one you're hearing now. And Voss? He was reassigned to a planet-side logistics office, far from any stars. They said it was an honorable retirement. I heard he spends his evenings walking the old parade grounds, fingers tracing a dent in his tusk that no polishing will remove. When someone greets him with Prefect, he corrects them quietly. Just Voss, he says. As for Mara Hale, the Quiet Belle, she vanished, as she always did, into the edges of need. But her echoes never stopped. The first echo came from the Kier Dominion. They built a memorial in orbit around the place where the Ravachon had exploded, a sculpture of 3 chords knotted together and painted yellow. Beneath it, an inscription in both languages, in memory of the day we held the rope. Here children learn the story in their schools now. They recite the lesson as if it were a prayer. The enemy is a teacher you have not met yet. The second echo came from the freighter fleets of the spur. Whenever 2 ships meet for trade, they still hum the Corinth tone through their hulls before opening their hatches. It's a small sound, barely there, but even the coldest captains claim the cargo tastes better afterward. The third echo came from us, from the conquered. Not the Senate, not the officers, but the citizens. They began to whisper a phrase that scared their leaders more than any rebellion: remember Corinth. They scrawled it on docking walls, etched it on cargo tags, carved it into their spoons. It meant do not let them sterilize the soul out of peace. The Senate tried to make an example of Voss, of me, of every officer who had stood and not shot. But the example turned inside out. The inquiry broadcast leaked, as everything leaks eventually, and the galaxy heard what happened in the operations bay in Dock 3 on the rope under the blankets. The more they tried to bury the story, the louder the hum became. That's when they came for the archives. For me. It was the 11th hour of station night when the inspectors arrived, 2 Concord marshals and 1 pale clerk whose eyes looked like they'd never seen sunlight. "Archivist Caith," the lead marshal said, "you are to surrender all unauthorized recordings and personal copies relating to Incident Corinth." I offered them the official version, sanitized, edited, hollow. They scanned it, nodded, and started to leave. Then the clerk paused at the door. "Sir," she said to me quietly, "is it true that they sang?" Her voice trembled like she already knew the answer. "They still do," I said. She hesitated, then pressed a small data wafer into my palm. "For when someone needs to remember again," she whispered. And then she followed the marshals out. The wafer held recordings, voices from the node, fragments I thought lost. Io's laugh, Vash the engineer whispering about bread, the refugee Lena saying she was thirsty, the marshal's cousin saying the soup was good. I listened to them all night. When the sun rose, or the nearest thing to sunrise that passes for one out here, I made a copy and sent it to every frequency the Senate didn't monitor. That's how the myth began. They say now that humans are cursed with memory. Maybe they're right. We remember everything, too much, too sharp, too long. The Senate bans our compassion because they call it contamination. The Kier worship it because they call it courage. Neither understands what it really is. It's hunger. We hunger to connect, to hold, to hear our names in another mouth and know we matter. Hunger is what kept Mara's hands steady when she opened the node. Hunger is what made the freighters link themselves into a human chain. Hunger is what made the marshal sing a song he didn't understand until the moment he did. That's the secret the galaxy fears. When humans hunger for peace, we devour war. I was walking Dock 3 last cycle when the alarms flickered for a maintenance test. The corridor filled with that same dim amber glow it had the day we nearly died. I stopped in the middle of the pale yellow lines. For a second, I could almost smell stew and ozone again. Then I heard a voice behind me. "You always come here when the lights dim," Mara said. I turned. She was older, maybe. Or maybe I just finally saw how tired she'd always been. Her jacket was the same, stained with new worlds. The node case hung over her shoulder like a loyal shadow. "They said you were gone," I managed. "I get that a lot." "Where?" "Everywhere." I helped a colony after a quake. I carried water to miners on a moon where it rains glass. I taught a Kier orphan how to write the word guest in both scripts. She smiled, faint but real. "It sticks." "You're still carrying it." She patted the case. Version 2. Smaller field, gentler touch. Doesn't just record the dying now. It records the living, too. Their laughter. Their stories. Their goodbyes before the bad comes. "You mean you built a remembrance node for hope?" "I mean I stopped pretending we can only learn from pain." We stood there, the hum of the station around us like a heartbeat. "They'll come again, you know," I said. "Another fleet. Another war," she nodded. "And when they do, someone will find this story. Maybe not the Senate, maybe not even humans, but someone. They'll hold the rope, light the kettles, hum the tone. They'll remember." "Do you ever get tired of saving us from ourselves?" Her smile widened. "It's not saving. It's reminding." Then she did what she always did, turned, walked to the airlock, and vanished into whatever trouble was waiting. I finish this final record now, sitting at the same console where she once tuned a broken receiver. The plaque of the Accord still lies on the floor. I've carved 3 words into it with my stylus, right under the old law that banned her kind. Remember the guests. If you are hearing this, then the node has opened again somewhere. Maybe on another station, maybe on another front. Maybe you pressed play because you wanted to understand why humans are still banned from galactic war. Here's your answer. We are not banned because we are cruel. We are banned because we remember too well. Because we turn every battlefield into a kitchen, every enemy into a neighbor, every war into a story no one can bear to repeat. We are banned because when we arrive, the war ends. So if someday you find yourself in a corridor painted yellow with a bowl in your hands and a song in your throat, sing. Even if you are alone. Especially if you are alone, because someone somewhere is holding the other end of the rope.